This video will not contain any story spoilers until the specifically marked section. While some of my battle footage will feature master arts from later classes, I've put everyone in their default outfits, so there shouldn't be any obvious class spoilers either. Now that's out of the way, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is the best game I've played in a long time. The moment I picked it up, I stopped playing anything else. Every minute I played this game made me crave more, both the gameplay and the story. Let's discuss why I feel this way. I'll start with gameplay and then move on to my spoiler-free thoughts on the story in general, and my thoughts on specific story spoilers will be in a separate video. Gameplay-wise, Xenoblade 3 can be summed up as taking the best parts of Xenoblade 1 and 2 while leaving behind all their worst aspects. I preface this by saying this is entirely my personal opinion, but for Xenoblade 1, this would be no more in-battle tension or affinity. I always disliked that system. It felt like battles were decided within the first few moments, because if you did badly early on, it was very hard to recover. Leveling up arts doesn't require you to farm arts manuals. Sidequests take the Xenoblade 2 approach of quality over quantity, instead of kill 20 of this enemy for no reason. Dedicated healers don't suck. Gem crafting has been heavily streamlined. In 3, you only need to craft each type of gem once, and from then on the entire party has access to it. As for Xenoblade 2, the tutorials are actually helpful. The hero mechanic is everything good about the blade mechanic, except no gacha, no dumb character designs, and much better balanced. Chain attacks are a lot less confusing. The world is genuinely interconnected instead of every area being isolated to its own titan. Tanks can actually hold aggro now. And in general, DPS isn't the be-all and end-all in terms of battle strategy. That said, no game is perfect, and Xenoblade 3 does have some issues those earlier games lacked. I'm going to cover those now, so that I get them out of the way early. Rest assured that almost everything I don't talk about in this section, I at least liked. Xenoblade 3 negative number 1. I think they overcorrected for 2's bad tutorials. Sure, 3's tutorials are better, can be reviewed at any time, and there's even a training drills mechanic that lets you try out what you've been taught in simulated battles. But the tutorials hold your hand a bit too much for the first chapter and a half of the game, typically forcing you to go into the menu and perform certain obvious actions yourself. The biggest offenders are that you get 2 virtually identical tutorials for equipping accessories, and the class swapping tutorial, which forces you to open the menu and manually set the class and arts for all 6 party members, one after the other, even though the process is identical for each one. This is a minor gripe in the grand scheme of things, because like I said, this only happens for the first 1.5 chapters. After that point, the obtrusive tutorials pretty much go away entirely, but they can be a little irritating until then. My next gripe is Keva's arts. This game combines the auto attack recharge and timer-based recharge of Xenoblade 1 and 2, and overall I just think auto attack recharge is objectively better, especially in the Xenoblade 2 style art system this game uses. I didn't mind timer recharge in Xenoblade 1 because every party member had a maximum of 8 arts in that game, so there was usually at least one that was off cooldown at any given time. Xenoblade 3 only lets you use 3 main arts and 1 talent art for your class, and this means that Keva's classes need to play a waiting game for a lot of fights, and again, I just prefer that everything used auto attack recharge at this point. It's a lot more interesting and dynamic. Gripe number 3, money is worthless. Money in this game is only used to buy accessories and use fabricators, and fabricators are incredibly cheap. The thing is, you'll likely never need to buy accessories because what unique monsters drop is just so much better than what any shop sells. Because of this, I was left with millions of gold by the end of the story that I just had no use for. It's especially annoying because this game has a mechanic where sell-only items are automatically converted into money when you get them, which would be convenient in a game where money actually served a purpose. Gripe number 4, the music. Before you faint for shock, let me clarify. All the battle themes are fantastic. It's the field themes that I have a problem with. Apparently the one who composed most of the field themes in 3 mainly did cutscene music for 1 and 2, and that kind of shows. The theme for one of the earlier areas, Millick Meadows, exemplifies this for me. Have a listen. This song really tries to have the same "welcome to the big wide world, the adventure really begins now" feeling of Gormott and Gower Plains themes from the first 2 games, but it just doesn't quite have that same oomph. And it's the same for the rest of 3's field themes. They just don't feel as memorable or impactful as the field themes of Xenoblade 1 and 2 to me. As a result, I actually struggle to remember the names of many of this game's locations. That may change as the years go on, but all the locations of Xenoblade 1 and 2, I have their names fully memorized, and I think the reason why is that their music is so memorable. I'll stress the actual areas in 3 are still good and fun to explore, I just wish they had better music. And final gripe, although it's kind of a big one, chain attacks are broken. So the chain attack system is incredibly fun in this game, and it's basically a create your own anime comeback moments. But here's the thing. Once I got the hang of this mechanic around early chapter 4, every single unique monster fight went like this. Survive until you get your chain attack, then you automatically win. The difference in damage output between normal gameplay and chain attacks is absolutely ridiculous, and only the major end of chapter boss fights have nearly enough health to handle them. And as you can see here by me taking not territorial Rotbart down from 75% to dead in a single hit, smash in chain attacks is kind of stupid. Overkilling enemies with chain attacks also gives you ridiculous experience bonuses, which, if done a lot during the main story, will result in you becoming very overleveled. Now, admittedly, there is an option in the menu to turn off the overkill bonus for chain attacks, and if you don't want to kill all difficulty in the main story, I would recommend you do this. While I'm on the subject of chain attacks, the chain attack theme is very good, however, it overrides literally any other song except the final boss theme. And this is a shame since the game's boss themes dynamically change based on how close you are to winning, and you will miss that if you go for chain attacks most of the time. I have a couple more negatives, but they're either story spoilers or related to the class system, so I'll cover those a little later. For now, on to the positives, and very much not an exhaustive list. I'll just say that almost everything I did not mention in the gripes section I love, but I'll just cover some of my favorites. The first is the class system. This is the best class swapping system I have ever experienced in a JRPG. There have been entire games, like the original Bravely Default, where I've been turned off simply because of the class system. That was not the case here. You start out with the 6 default classes of the party, and gradually gain more as more heroes join. By fighting with that class, it will gradually spread to other members of the party, and they'll be able to access it at any time. No second seal or anything like that required. The party members do technically have their own stat specialties, but they're subtle enough that nobody feels bad in any class. While at the same time, being able to use all 6 party members at once, and the sheer variety in classes there is, it never felt like the reclassing system robbed characters of their individuality either. There's also a lot of freedom in how you use the class system. You can choose to have party members hyper-specialize in certain types of roles, or make everybody a generalist. Each class initially levels up to 10, or 20 once you've unlocked their Ascension quest, and at intervals of 5 levels, you'll unlock either an art or a skill from that class to transfer to other classes. Most Ascension quests aren't available until very late, which means crazy min-maxing isn't really possible until the post-game. But despite that, this is hands down my favourite class leveling system in any JRPG I've played. Because classes max out slowly enough that you feel very rewarded for your efforts, but not so slowly that it feels like a tedious grind. By the end of just the main story, without even much side questing, I had the entire party at least level 10 in almost every class. And as I alluded to earlier, the class balance is also very good for the most part. There are some classes that are overpowered and others that are a little weaker, but the gaps between tiers didn't feel nearly as big as they were in Xenoblade 2. No class felt outright worthless, and even the weaker classes give good skills when leveled up. Between chain attack bonuses and basic gameplay, this game also encourages a balanced party composition. Again, far better than Xenoblade 2 did, where if you know what you were doing, attackers did so much damage tanks could never hold aggro, the best healers were attackers in all but name, and health potions and crit healing meant attackers were better healers than healers. The metagame of 3 is still evolving, but from what I've seen so far, the best party comps tend to consist of an even mix of attackers, healers, and tanks. And it says something that the most broken class in the game is a dedicated healing and support one. I think it does really help that healers now have the unique role of being the only class that can revive allies. This does mean that you're pretty much screwed in a fight if all your healers go down, but in that case it was your fault for not putting enough healers in the party anyway, or not protecting them well enough. There is one slight gripe I have though, and that is one class in particular, Stalker. I won't spoil exactly what this class is, but I will say that the moment that I started using this class, I went from dominating to sucking, and the moment I stopped using it, I went back to dominating. Yeah, that doesn't really bode well. Another thing I love about this game that's tied to the class system is the hero system. As I said earlier, this is everything good about Xenoblade 2's Blades with none of the bad. Heroes are essentially collectible guest party members. You'll have to do a hero quest for each one, some of these are required by the main story and some of them are optional, and once that quest is completed, the hero joins the party permanently as a 7th member that can be swapped in at any time, and the party gains access to their class. Hero quests are also fully voice acted and have great side stories to them. I think it really says something that out of all the heroes in the game, there is only one that I dislike as a character. And it's not even their personality, it's entirely due to their voice, but I'll cover that in the story spoilers section. Because of the great characters and storylines, in addition to being new party members and new classes, doing hero quests felt amazingly rewarding in both a story and a gameplay sense. Every hero also has an Ascension quest that lets you get their class to level 20. However, besides the main parties, I only found one hero Ascension quest while playing blind, so I can't give much of an opinion on them as most of them will be left to post-game for me. The one I did do was good, and the party quests are also pretty great. Though I will say, please do Senna's personal quest. It really should have been part of the main story, because it gives closure to some plot points that otherwise don't get brought up again. I also highly recommend doing Uni and Tyon's personal quests. Now I want to cover regular side quests because how I felt about these was a little complicated. The quest that I did do, I really loved. I think they all give excellent world building, and the affinity chart returning from 1 greatly enhances this. I really missed it in Xenoblade 2. The problem was that after a certain point, I was loving the main story so much, and getting too overleveled from chain attack overkills, that I started ignoring side quests entirely. It just would have taken me too long to get through the story if I'd bothered with them, and they would have only exaggerated my overleveling problem. For the first time in the series, I ended up leaving every non-hero quest for post-game past about Chapter 4, and I was okay with this. Unlike in 1, side quests don't ever expire, which I think is absolutely for the better. So there's a lot of potential ways you can tackle them, whether you leave them for post-game or whether you do them alongside the main story, you'll probably still enjoy them. They're all very good. I'm sure you're all eager to hear my thoughts on the main story, but before that, I just want to mention that this game does callbacks to past games and nostalgia, one of the best ways I've ever seen in a video game. So, this game takes place in a world in the very distant future of both Xenoblade 1 and 2. What this means is the main party doesn't know or care about the world's history. So any references to past games are left entirely up to the player to get. And I love this. It means that they're great if you do get those references, but nothing in the experience is lost if you don't. As an example, here's a landmark from the Mulek Meadows area. If you played Xenoblade 1, you'll know that this is a guidepost from Gower Plain in that game. But the characters don't point it out because they don't know, and it's not relevant to the story. Way too many franchises these days, both video games and otherwise, love to grab their audience by the shoulders, shake them, and yell in their face, look, it's that thing you love from the past installment! Aren't we just so clever for referencing it? And so Xenoblade 3's method feels really refreshing by comparison. And now my thoughts on the story. No spoilers yet, just some vague general thoughts. As expected of a Xenoblade game, the story is fantastic, and it hooked me just as much as the gameplay. Every cutscene left me waiting to see what would happen next. And while this game does have a lot of long cutscenes and a lot of dialogue, it never wastes them. Every scene and every line felt like it had a purpose. And there are very few moments of bloat, filler, or padding in the main storyline, which I appreciated given a certain other JRPG I also played in 2022. The main party are all great characters, having a nice mix of solo and group moments over the course of the plots, which is helped by the fact that all 6 join very early, meaning they spend almost the entire story as one unit. Their character development throughout the main plot is subtle and nuanced. Don't expect any drastic transformations, but it's all very grounded and very well done. I rank Senna slightly below the others, and that's only because whenever the story tries to give her focus, her screen time has an annoying tendency to get hijacked by NPCs. This is also aided by fantastic voice performances. Harry McEntire as Noah is particularly a standout, but the entire cast, both main party and heroes and villains of this game, is amazing, with one extremely notable exception, who I'll go into later, but the good news is they don't appear until Chapter 5. The bad news is they're a very major character from that point on, and you can't avoid hearing their voice. Sure, there's a lot of repeating lines after battles, but it's Xenoblade, that's part of the charm.
We're unstoppable with you around, Senna.
I'm the girl with the gall.
We're unstoppable with you around, Senna.
I'm the girl with the gall.
Though I will admit, Xenoblade 2 had a lot more variety in post-battle conversations. I'm also obliged to mention the fake swearing here because a lot of people find it annoying. I'm okay with it because it works from a world-building standpoint. Most swear words in the English language are tied to sex or religion, which are both concepts that are alien to the inhabitants of Ionios. Here is how I sum up my feelings on the main plot, but this could be considered vaguely spoilers for some people, so it's okay if you want to stop listening now. For those still here, I think the main story is near flawless up to the start of Chapter 6. With the end of Chapter 5 and the beginning of Chapter 6 being the best story moment I have ever seen in a video game. And that to me is the story's biggest problem. It peaks too early. Everything that comes after the Chapter 6 intro isn't necessarily bad, it's just that those moments are so brain-explodingly good that anything would feel like a disappointment afterwards. The last few chapters to me also feel simultaneously too rushed and too slow, in that there are larger gaps between plot points, with the areas breaking them up being less interesting, and the plot points mostly consisting of major lore dumps that the game doesn't have enough time to elaborate on. That said though, I still love the final boss and the ending was very strong. I don't like to compare this game's story to the earlier 2 games because it is very much its own thing and should be judged on its own merits. But if I had to, I definitely rank 3's plot above 1's, but it's hard to say whether I rank it above 2's or not. Why it's so hard is that 2 had a better finale in my opinion, but it also had a far rougher early game, and the horrible filler hell that was Chapter 4. Xenoblade 3 had a far better early storyline and much more consistent pacing up to its peak, but lost a bit of steam towards the end. I'd overall say Xenoblade 3's story is objectively better, but I still subjectively prefer the ending and characters of 2. But if there's any gap between the 2 stories in my mind, it's very, very small. So overall, there were a few stumbles towards the end, but I really liked Xenoblade 3's story. It's one of my favourite video game stories of all time, up there with the first 2 games. This game was a joy to play from start to finish, and I highly encourage anyone to check it out. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section, and I just hope that we'll see more games as good as this in the future, because I haven't felt this good playing a video game in a long time, and I really want to again.